Hey, this is the Foff for the Foff Guide once again. We're in episode number 4. My God, I can't believe this is 4 episodes. This show's about editing and the importance of editing and who needs an editor and why you edit and things you can do when you don't have an editor. So enjoy the show. Thank you very much. Bye. Hello, Bob. Thank you very much for coming out today. I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming down to Vancouver and joining me in the beautiful West End. We are on
here. It is beautiful.
a little park on Cardero in between Pendrell and Comox. There's the King George Elementary School behind us. It's a very picturesque part of the world.
Oh, it is, absolutely. So, okay. So, I just want to talk about editing. Who needs an editor? I'm like, do you need an editor or what?
Everybody needs an editor. I am a professional editor and have been since I was 17 or 18 years old. When I die, on my gravestone, it'll be said that I was an editor who met his deadline. Everything that I do professionally involves some kind of editing, including publishing, teaching, and writing. But editing is my number one professional skill. Everyone needs an editor, even a professional editor. I tell my students that the two things they need to acquire before they graduate from university, number one is an editor, someone who is smart, critical, who can provide direct and helpful feedback, and the other is to get a mentor, someone who will help you with your career and look after you.
And I remember that episode we talked about mentorship and editors. So this time I want to do the editing part, which is important. And I thought I'd do another show on it. You know what I mean? I thought it'd be very important to do. Right?
That's an excellent idea. Let me start with one of my favorite quotes. One of my mentors, a beautiful, brilliant woman, a biographer named Diane Middlebrook. She wrote biographies of Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath. Once told me that a person can no more edit herself or himself than that person can tickle herself or himself. And for the same reason. I'm not going to try to tickle myself on your video. I'm sure I look odd enough. But imagine, like, you can't really tickle yourself because you know what's coming. You can't trick yourself. In a similar way, when you're editing your own work, you have to deal with the fact that you already know what is coming, so you don't have a fresh set of eyes. You don't have the proper distance.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, later in this interview, I'll suggest ways in which you can address that, because a lot of us don't always have someone nearby to edit our work.
Yeah.
And so how do you go about editing yourself? But I love that quote. You can't edit yourself, really, any more than you can tickle yourself. And if you can tickle yourself, then write Jamie an email, and he might want to do another video. Here is why you need an editor. There are several things that a writer cannot fully understand about his or her own work, because the writers had the experience of drafting the work. And I call these things the 9 C's. Very conveniently, they all begin with C. And these are reasons, these are topics that require another set of eyes. One, is my article, is my document, is it complete enough? Is there anything missing? And now a writer might think that everything that I've needed to put in this document, I put in this document. But for psychological reasons, sometimes what a writer thinks is on the piece of paper has remained inside of his or her head. And so if I say, Jamie, did I say everything I needed to say here?
I think it went.
Jamie, you could say, no, I think you missed the main point. And one of my best friends, who edits me, always used to like to say, like, Bob, again, you forgot to put in the main point. So I was thinking about the main point throughout this entire document, but I didn't put it in there. So I needed someone else. Um, Another C is concise. Is it concise enough? Is it short enough?
So you don't want to be verbose and use words that you don't need to repeat yourself.
And you don't want to repeat yourself, and you don't want to waste anybody's time.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
unless you are the most important person in your reader's life, you can't waste their time. Often people like to accentuate their points. Like, this is so important, I'm going to say it in a different way than another different way. And very often, almost always, you don't need that repetition. A third C, is it clear enough? Now this you can always ask like a smart person. Does this make sense? Of course, when I wrote this down, it made sense to me. I'm the subject matter expert. But I might have used words that my reader doesn't know. I may not have made the point.
So know your audience.
No,
as well.
right. And sometimes you need someone who is not an expert to say, Bob, I don't understand this paragraph. Could you use different words? And I'm not going to go through the entire list, but two more important C's. When you are putting together a persuasive document or a presentation with the intention of persuading someone to take a course of action or to do something, are you convincing enough? Now, I always think I'm totally convincing, but my partner will tell you I'm almost never convincing. She's very smart, and my brother will say, Bob, that doesn't make sense. I realize that when I think I'm persuasive, very often I'm not, because I'm not addressing the concerns, the issues, the questions that my audience does. So I would go Jamie, would this persuade you to respond the way I want you to? And you would say, no. And I go, how come? How do I have to change my document or my presentation to be persuasive? So these are all things that are nearly impossible to do by yourself. I cannot just say, I wrote this. It's so beautiful. I wrote it myself. It has to be.
The problem when you think it's beautiful, there's so many flaws that you don't notice. So good at it.
Right, and you're blind. You're almost literally blind to, is it complete, is it concise, is it clear, is it convincing? I tell my students, I tell my writers, you're going to see a lot of red. You're going to see a whole bunch of stuff crossed out, and you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff put in. Don't take it personally. We all want your document to be as perfect as possible. And I've proven to you that you need an editor. Everyone needs an editor, and an editor is going to mark up your page. If you're defensive, if you think that no one should touch your writing, that you don't need an editor, that's a problem. It's a big problem, and your document will not be improved, and you as a writer will see your skills erode. You won't get any better. So we all need editing. I have a couple funny stories. I was always an editor from the time I turned 18 years old when I went to university. But I got my true start as a professional editor in the early 80s. And I was doing some drudgery proofreading work for a local publisher. And I came into the publishing house and dropped off this stack of proofs, all corrected. And I was about to leave, and the managing editor of the press, a woman named Doris Doyle, was just about to send off the cover of a book to the printer. And there it was, the big laminate sheets. And I kind of looked at it, and it was a book by a famous writer called Martin Gardner. And he wrote the annotated Alice in Wonderland. And he wrote a whole bunch of columns on science. for Scientific American. And I was looking at the cover, and Martin was spelled Matrin. And I remember thinking, wow, I always thought this man was called Martin. But apparently his name is Matrin. And I'm about to walk out of the office. I said, I've never heard of anyone named Matrin. I said, well, would it be possible that someone as smart as Doris Doyle could miss such an obvious typo on the cover of a book? Better safe than sorry. I said, Doris, is that a typo? And she turned bright red. It was indeed a typo on the cover of a book. And the reason she missed it, the reason everybody had missed it, was because everyone assumed that there could not possibly be a typo on the cover of a book. So no one really looked at it. I saved that company probably tens of thousands of dollars. If we had to recall the book to correct the cover, all of our advertising would have been dated. It would have cost the company a lot of money, and probably some of my friends who worked there would have been laid off. Anyway, I got a full-time job that day, working for that publisher. Another funny story. In the same office, as I said, everyone needs editing. Some of the smartest people I know don't write very well. They don't. They might speak very well. They could do beautiful scholarship, but they don't write very well, and so they need an editor. One such person, rest in peace, is a man named Vern Bullock. He probably wrote about 40 books. He was one of the pioneers in the history of sex, among all sorts of other topics. All of his books are well written. The reason they're well written is because they were well edited. Because Vern would not have been able to write them without help. One day, Vern came in with just a short piece, maybe 500 words, a column for a magazine I was working on. And I knew I just crossed everything off my schedule. I said, I won't be able to do anything else today, except fix this horribly written piece by Vern Bullock. Hair was falling out of my head. I didn't answer the phone. There wasn't enough coffee in the whole house for me to make it through. Anyway, 8 hours later, there wasn't a single sentence that was not untouched. It was completely rewritten. I figured out what he was trying to say, and I had to make it sound like Vern. It couldn't sound like me. I wasn't the expert on this topic. So Vern Bullock comes in the next day, and I give him the page proofs, what it's going to look like in the magazine. The big man, he had an interesting voice. So he reads this, and I'm thinking, Vern is going to know that I totally rewrote this. He might get mad. He reads it, and then he puts it down, and he looks at me and he says, Bob, I am a really good writer, aren't I? To this day, I don't know if he was joking or not. Because my goal as an editor was to make his column perfect, without blemish. And my other goal was to make sure that it sounded exactly like Vern, that it accomplished his purpose, so that when he read this, he would be able to say, I own this. This is what I was trying to say. Either way, it was a success, and very many editing experiences which are variations of that, where as an editor you want to accomplish what the writer wanted to accomplish, and as an editor you want to disappear into the author's purpose. I've one other anecdote. Editors do more than just like fix mistakes in articles, prose, presentations. Often, let's say a piece is incomplete. The writer thinks everything is there, but it's not there. So often you have to write an introduction. Often you have to write a conclusion. The author thought that they were there, but they're not there. My favorite experience of this was I was editing a column by B.F. Skinner.
B.F. Skinner, like the behaviorist?
The founder,
Famous behaviorist who just like
behavior psychologist,
most hardcore one in the world, pretty much.
very hardcore, and he knew how to write. He was a beautiful writer too. But even beautiful writers, sometimes they're not clear enough, they're not concise enough, they're not convincing enough. Or in his case, he wasn't complete enough. I found that this piece needed an introduction, and it needed a proper closing. And so I drafted them out, and we FedExed B.F. Skinner my edited copy. And we were under such a tight deadline, he had to respond right away. So he had to respond by phone, whether my edits were good enough. So I come home the next day, and my then beautiful wife, well, she's still beautiful, but she's my ex-wife now, says, Bob, you'll never guess who called. I said, who called? B.F. Skinner. Wow. He said that he loved your new introduction, he loved your new ending, it's perfect, that's what he meant to say all along. He hopes he gets a chance to work with you again. You really made his piece better. I said, wow, that's so wonderful. Can I hear the voicemail? And my wife said, oh, I deleted it.
The only proof that you're the ultimate editor.
Right.
So it happens.
So, viewers of this video, you can take it with a grain of salt. Hopefully, my ex-wife would vouch for me if she remembers, but that did indeed happen. And so, even someone as accomplished as B.F. Skinner needed someone to draft an introduction and a closing to his piece. So there's no shame in receiving lots of help from people who are much brighter than us. Know how important it is to avail yourself of an editor. Jamie, you had asked me before we met today if I could present some strategies for what can you do if you don't have an editor.
Yeah, exactly. That's because sometimes it's like 10 o'clock at night. It's due at 12, or it's due the next day, and you're like kind of in a bind, and your mom's not home, or something like that. I'm not saying there's no editors out there, but sometimes it's hard to find one in a bind, right?
A couple things, Jamie. One, do your best. Everyone should do their best to separate by at least a day the deadline and the date that you draft something. Especially if you don't have anyone to look at it. If you don't leave at least a day, then some of the techniques I'm going to describe will not be available to you. What's very important when you're editing your own work is to estrange yourself.
So talk with time. Do it a day later. Look at it a day later.
Exactly. So make your own writing strange to you, foreign to you, so you can look at it with a fresh set of eyes. So you can edit it as though you're editing another person's document. And one way to do that is to sleep on it. It'll look very different the next morning. I'm astonished, and I've been a professional writer my whole life, like how many things I miss. I thought I said this the night before, and I wake up the next day and I said something a little bit different that if I had sent the night before would have gotten me in trouble, or would have been misleading. So that's one way. Make sure that you're drafting and you're submitting don't happen on the same day. There's some other ways of estranging yourself from your piece. One is to read it out loud. the experience you've had with your document is an experience of researching and writing. When you speak it, it excites a different part of your brain. It's easier for you to determine whether it's too long, whether you're repeating yourself, whether certain words make sense. Certain things pop out when you read them. You can say, boy, that's a long sentence.
That's small.
Exactly. So reading things aloud. Then a very familiar, a common way for academics or any serious authors is to slice in to a document, using very narrow knives, as it were. So go through a document in which you look for just one thing at a time. Going through a document, making sure all of your quotes are correct. Going through it again, making sure all of your citations are correct. Going through and making sure that all of your capitalization is consistent. Is
with the style sheet, obviously.
Yeah, with a style sheet. Like, do I capitalize, University of British Columbia? Do I capitalize university, or is it smaller case? Is it the same everywhere? Is it congruent throughout the document?
Yeah.
I recommend people go through another way of slicing in is just look for punctuation. Am I joining two separate sentences with a comma? That's a comma splice. That's a run-on sentence. Is there a verb and a noun in the sentence, or is it a sentence fragment? So I would go through, especially smaller documents, 9 or 10 times, but only looking for one thing. And so that also estranges you from the document. You're not reading it paragraph by paragraph. You're looking for specific things. In preparation for this interview, I was reading some of the posts I made for my communications website, nocontest.ca. And I was reading about this very famous nonfiction writer named Gay Talese, Talese. And he would work on monumental nonfiction reporting, what used to be called new journalism. And so what he would do, he would tape all the pages of a chapter on the wall, fill a wall. Then he'd stand back and he would look at his manuscript from the other side of the room with binoculars. Right, so he'd...
Did he randomly put them, or were they in order?
They were in order. Good question.
Okay,
Good question.
Yeah.
So this way he could say, okay, like I mentioned this mafia boss over here. Did I already introduce him over there? So he'd look up. No, I didn't. So he'd go up to the wall and say, introduce this guy over here. It was a way for him to look at the large structure and small items at the same time.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're writing or you're typing, you're up close with your words. When you're looking at, you're writing through binoculars, it looks very strange. And that is what you want your experience to be. You want to have a strange experience of your own manuscript. So that's one of my favorite ones. Another, I was just reading, what's the fellow's name? Byron Garner, Garner. He's a lawyer who's written all sorts of encyclopedias, writing guides. Someone I read all the time, I count on. His rule is when you are editing your own stuff, print it out. Print it out and edit by hand. This is especially important these days. I'm dating myself. When most of your writing has been done on screen.
Yeah,
and so
that's my writing.
Everyone's writing this now.
Yeah.
When I started university, when I was in grad school, still, you were typing. So when you're typing, you're actually looking at the page, the same page you're going to edit. When you're writing on a computer screen, you're looking at something that's shining back on your face. It's a different biological, physiological experience. So Byron Garner says, change the medium. Change the medium. Instead of looking at it on screen, we all know that you can edit on screen using track changes, comments, and so on and so forth. print it out and edit by hand. Even though it's the same page, you are estranged from the paper version. And it's easier to scan a whole page, to scan 2 pages at a time, 3 pages at a time, move this paragraph over here, know where these 3 pages are in the context of the entire work.
Yeah, well, usually what I do is I put page numbers on every single one of mine.
Mm-hmm.
That way I know what the order is, just in case I.
Right.
Whoops! Pick.
Right. Why this is important, I think, over and above psychological, physiological, biological, ocular reasons, is when you're editing by hand, you can't just vaporize entire sentences. You can't go delete, poof, it's gone. You either have to cross it out, and when you cross it out, you still see it. Or,
in case you need it later on.
right, or when I was in university, we used to edit with red pens and razor blades. So if you wanted this paragraph taken out, your editor would say, razor blade, Jamie, and zing, zing. And actually you take the paragraph out and you put it on a stack of other paragraphs that have been taken out. So you can actually go back. Oh, I liked something in that stack. So oddly enough, just editing by hand is a completely different experience than editing on screen. It doesn't take any longer. It doesn't take any time to input your edits. So it's a very sound way of estranging yourself from your own text. To edit it when you don't have someone like me or you around to help someone with their document.
So here's the fear: getting caught in plagiarism. Now, what's the difference between a good editor and somebody who's plagiarizing? Is there a difference between, like, what are the differences between them? Like, I'm just curious.
Oh, another. Is it okay to have an editor write some of your stuff? Like if I'm adding a paragraph, like is that plagiarism?
Well, I mean, in school, obviously, if you got an editor in a book, you can sort of get away with that. But when it comes to school, which is the fan base out on this website,
Right.
And what is the difference between plagiarism and just the person editing it? I mean, is there a fine line or what?
That's an excellent question, and it depends on who your professor is or what department you're writing for.
Yeah.
In my classes, in my marketing classes, and in my writing classes, I tell my students that they are allowed to have readers, but their readers aren't allowed to produce any text that is submitted under the name of the student. What the readers are allowed to do is to make comments. Jamie, this paragraph isn't persuasive.
Sentence or something. Yeah. Certain teachers are different.
Yeah,
All teachers
yes.
are different. They got different styles to. Okay, you can't use this, you can't use that, and some teachers like I can use whatever.
Some teachers, and they have good rationale for it, don't want you to receive any help whatsoever. When I'm teaching, my goal is to help convey professional habits to writers. And when I would be writing news releases or business plans or management discussions for annual reports for my clients, I would always have other people edit, submit, add content because these were very important documents. And so that's a habit I want my students as future professional people to have. Now, in terms of students, I tell
always talk to the teacher first.
Always talk to the teacher. So can I have my dad or my best friend kind of go over my document and tell me whether or not it makes sense? Or can I ask someone who's the subject matter expert on what I'm writing on if I'm leaving anything out? And if they say yes, then avail yourself of that person. If they say no, then you're on your own. I know a lot of people, even in the same department that I teach have a different approach. I don't want anyone to get in trouble, so I always recommend tell your instructors what you wish to do, and have them sign off on it orally.
And in my opinion, is that always ask. If you don't know, if you think it might be plagiarism, just ask, right? And if there is a problem, then they'll be able to deal with it. As opposed to, like, I've heard two people make mistakes, but they're so close to being not plagiarism. It's unbelievable. I'll probably talk about them in a future time, but it was unfortunate that it happened, but you can see why they plagiarized, that they got caught plagiarizing. So,
I tell everybody that I can tell. Jamie, if you submitted an assignment to me, you were a former student of mine many years ago, I would be able to tell if someone had written a single sentence that was not yours.
Yeah.
I'd be able to find the sentence, and I'd be able to explain to you, this is not a Jamie sentence. So not everyone has my ear for that. A lot of people do. I recommend for school that no student ever have someone else write any part of an assignment. Receiving feedback is one thing. Receiving written verbal help on an assignment is something different entirely. Now, I'm a professional writer as well as a professional editor. I've written several books, ghostwritten several more. We don't get a whole lot of money for doing this. Sometimes almost no money. But we do get credit for what we write and publish. So I have a special sensitivity to plagiarism, because you're stealing work for which the author wasn't even compensated that much for money. All that person gets is credit, professional credit. So I could not be more against plagiarism. Editing properly done, certainly not plagiarism in the professional world. Everyone gets edited. But there is a fuzzy line.
at least an acknowledgement at the end of the essay, where it goes, I acknowledge James Markson or whatever for editing the paper. Acknowledgement.
Yes, I've edited several doctoral dissertations. Not the funnest activity, but all dissertations require someone to edit, to proofread, because they've been working on the same topic for years. It's impossible for them to have a fresh set of eyes looking at this stuff. And so typically in the acknowledgement section of a master's thesis or a dissertation, they'll say, thank you, James Pollinoff, for proofreading and editing my document, especially chapter 6 and 7.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's completely above board. Or thank you, Jamie, for correcting several mistakes I made in chapter 4 and pointing me to a new interpretation of the set of data.
Okay.
That would be how I would handle that. It's beginning to rain.
So
You can tell this interview is taking place just about in summertime in Vancouver, because it's gray as winter and it's starting to rain.
So, is there any closing comments you'd like to make with viewers?
I would like to stress again how important it is to have a reader/editor of
Even
your.
if it's your mom or dad, even if they only got grade 12, it still helps, right?
Oh, I think a mom and dad are almost like your editors. In other words, like, we've always had editors. Our parents are often editing us just in terms of how we behave, how we talk, what to do.
Yeah.
But I like to think of parents as what I call smart, dumb people. They're smart because they're your parents. They can think, they can reason, they know the ways of the world, but they're dumb in the sense that they might not know your topic very well. And so a smart dumb person is a beautiful, if untrained, editor. Because they can read, they can reason, they can think, and they can ask smart questions. And as I think I mentioned to all my students, there's no such thing really as a dumb question. So your mom or dad might not be able to rewrite your assignment, which is a good thing, but they will be able to say, this doesn't make sense, Jamie, this is incomplete. You go on and on and on, like, you can get rid of half of this stuff, or this doesn't seem to be correct, or your writing is inconsistent. A smart dumb person can do that for you. Your roommate, the person who's watching a hockey game with you, they are able to help out a lot, if not as a editor, as a smart dumb person who can give you very helpful comments on your document.
Well, I think we got a lot of information today, and I appreciate you coming out to Vancouver with me.
Oh,
and,
my pleasure.
Doing the interview, and I hope to see you again.
Me too. I look forward to seeing the video.
Awesome. All right.
Hey guys, this is the Fob once again. I just want to say thank you very much to Bob Basil. We really appreciate you coming out and showing us support and teaching us all about editing. And the great thing is he gives you the professor's experience and his point of view when he's looking at students' work. So thank you very much, and see you next time.